Well, good morning. Welcome to our home. It should be on. Thank you. It should be on. Yeah, it's on. You're good to go. Just make sure you're holding it nice and close there.
All right.
So before we get really into depth in what you guys want to share, just start by telling us a little bit about your family, how you two met, just kind of a backstory, if you would.
Okay, so a bit of my just individual history. So I grew up in a Catholic church, attending church every week, Sunday school. Went to college and kind of just floundered a bit. Went with other friends to other churches, looked around. After college, got married and moved up to Dallas area and joined a Lutheran church and got really involved with that. Eventually that marriage failed, but was single parenting for a while, and after a bit of time, met Shirley.
Okay, I grew up in East Texas, grew up in a very tiny Methodist church. Became a Christian after high school, after I graduated, moved to A&M, was really involved in the Aggies for Christ, moved back up to this area for my first job, met a young man at work. I started going to Saturn Road Church of Christ, and we married and had 3 daughters and raised them at Saturn Road. And I've effectively was at Saturn Road for 27 years, so all of my adult life, until our marriage failed, and I had to leave. So that's its own story. And at that point, my older 2 were already married, and my youngest was in high school. And so after a period of time, I started looking, and I like to say that God did some matchmaking, and he used Match.com. So we met online, and we found out that we had a whole lot in common. We had both been at A&M at the same time, some of the same professors, possibly same classes, we don't really know. Had coworkers in common, lived 3 miles apart, worked a mile apart. Our kids knew some people in common. I used to work with his uncle. It just goes on and on, what we call near misses. So, but again, God used Match.com.
Well, thank you. So when you approached us, and so the idea was that you saw a need, and you're part of a blended family. So a little bit about how that's working between the two of you, but also what led you to see the need here and say we need a class for families that are like us that we can really minister to that. What's the history of the behind that?
How big is the family?
Okay. Yeah, let's start there.
Okay. So we talked about a blended family. So blended meaning. Like previous marriages, you have children from your family, children maybe from another family, and so you're trying to blend together, right? Brady Bunch type of thing. So I have 3 kids. The oldest is now in college, middle is in high school, and the youngest is a freshman in high school. So I've got my 3. Shirley has 3. She mentioned 2 are already married, another in college, and then Shirley, you have 2 nephews and a niece, like Ben and Logan, who are here. So that's like 9. So when we got married, the nephews were living with Shirley. Again, moving in from East Texas. And so we needed a really big house. So we sold my house, Shirley sold her house, and we moved in together. And we had one year we had 8 of us living in the house. The next year there were 9 of us. So this year there's 4. So it's lots of struggles, lots of changes going on. Anything else to add to that? I think that's about it. Yeah. So that's what got us into the blended family, and we could tell that we had a lot of certain expectations and things, and some things worked, and some things were not working. And so that kind of gets us to, I think, the next question.
Well, there were, like he said, there were some things that were not working. We went into it with some expectations. Hey, we're both really good single parents. We can do this. I can be a mom to your kids. You can be a dad to my kids. I have a lot of kids who need a dad. I have, my 3 and 3 bonus kids. We can do that. Guess what? It doesn't work that way. So our expectations really weren't realistic, and we didn't know that until we were living it. So Beverly approached us at some point and said, hey, I'm going to do this video series on blended families. Are you guys interested? Yeah, I think we could actually use some help here. And we're both engineers. We're both, investigative, and we're going to go research and so forth. So we did this video series with her, and then we started looking into some other resources, and we did some other things. We went to a conference a couple months ago in Little Rock on blended family ministry. And we went into it not really knowing what we were going to do with it. You know, I didn't even really feel worthy of going. It's like I messed up so much. Why do I think I can help anybody else? But we've learned a lot. We're still on the journey. We're definitely still on the journey. But I think we just really have a passion for letting people know that, number one, you're not crazy, and number two, you're not alone. That there's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of people who are going through the same thing.
There's probably some things that are obvious to those that are not in a blended family environment, but there's probably a lot of things that aren't. So from an obstacle perspective, what are some things that, because we do have a lot of blended families here, we're very unique in that way. For those that are not in that environment, what are some obstacles that are unique to that situation that maybe, myself or someone else would not be aware of?
So one of the things that we've learned that's kind of interesting, and when you go through these conferences or watch these video series and things, it becomes obvious after you hear it. But if you think about a blended family, how did you get there? So one of the things is you always start from a place of sorrow or pain. So there's a lot of hurt there, right? Either you had a parent who died, and so there's pain there, or you had a family that died. And so the foundation of a blended family is pain. And so you've got to keep that in mind, and you're always working with that. You're always having to deal with that.
For everyone, not just for the parents who have gone through this, but for the kids. Yeah. They're coming from a place of pain, and they're trying to figure that out as they go. And a lot of times that involves acting out or pushing against this person that they didn't invite into their home, they didn't necessarily want in their home. So another thing that we kind of learned that really stuck with me, I also came from a blended family. My history is that as well. My parents divorced when I was 5. My mother remarried. I didn't see my biological father again until I was 14, and didn't have a relationship with him throughout my life. So I learned, just from my own family, about something called developmental mourning, and that is these kids go through the pain of that loss throughout their lives. And just because they may be a teenager when the divorce happens, or a baby, let's say they're a baby when the divorce happens, still, as they become teenager and young adults and they graduate from high school or have their first child, there's a parent missing. One way or another, there's a hurt there that just happens over and over and over again. My biological father passed away this year. I didn't go to the funeral. It was in another state. I wasn't even included. And yet I saw my half-siblings get hundreds of mournings, on Facebook. And I had to process it, on my own. So that's one thing that we learned is, this hurt doesn't heal after a year or 2 years. It can last a lifetime. And step-parents have to understand that from the children's point of view. Another thing is these kids have a lot of influences in their life that you have no control over. So even if you don't remarry, perhaps your ex did, and they have a step-parent and they have step-siblings that they may have to live with, that they may or may not get along with, or those step-siblings are going through their own mourning and their own pain. And so there's a lot of influences. All of a sudden these kids may have 8 sets of grandparents. And so where does Christmas get spent? Where do they go? There's tugs and pulls and struggles that I as a step-parent or he as a step-parent may have no control over. So that's, some of the struggles that step-parents, it's a whole layer of struggles that a nuclear family hopefully doesn't have to deal with.
Well, we really appreciate that because, like I was saying, there's a lot of intricacies. You talked about the pain and things that you might anticipate, but just hearing you guys speak on that is something that I just learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have even thought about in that situation. So take a moment and just turn, specifically speaking, to those that are in a blended family environment now, or even perhaps single parents that may one day be in a blended family environment. What is some advice or some encouragement or some hope? If they're beginning this journey, if they're in the middle of the journey that's not maybe going well, what are some things that you could offer to them directly? And it may be along the lines of what the class is going to be about too. So if you want to kind of plug the class at the same time, you can certainly do that.
So the first thing that we have really learned the hard way, and then saw it in a video, is let the biological parent parent. Step-parent cannot come in and parent because the relationship isn't there yet. They have to build that relationship, and that doesn't take a year. It may take 7 years. It may take 10 years. It may take a really long time for that relationship to be there, and it happens at the pace that the kid wants it to happen. So I can't force parenting on his children. Let the biological parent parent.
Yeah, like we said, we were both very good single parents. And when we got together, that was one of the expectations that we missed. I still mess up. That's why I tend to single parent still forget to, oh yeah, I should have told Shirley this, right? I make a decision with my kids and she doesn't know what's going on. So then she's out of the loop and then she feels hurt. And so I've got to keep conscious thought of doing that. Some of these things, when you try to have an interaction, you can force it, but some of them you can't. I know when we were first dating, I had one episode where her daughter came back from St. Louis, and she was just there for a weekend, and I came over, be introduced as the new boyfriend, and I was only going to be there for an hour. So I had an hour to try to start a relationship. And so I remember this one time she was looking in the refrigerator, and she just was bent over looking in it. So I got right behind her, got in her personal space, and then she kind of looked at me, and I said, "Can you find it? Is it in there?" Just trying to start something. Sometimes you can force things, but sometimes you can't.
So we recommend, of course you can't force it, so try to build new memories. And new traditions. We have some new traditions that are a whopping 3 years old. And the kids look forward to it. And this year when we went out to pick our Christmas tree in Greenville, Meredith, his daughter, wanted to bring her boyfriend along, which is great because this is her family tradition now, and it's something that they had never done before we met. So new traditions, game night, try to laugh. And this is to me, try not to take things so seriously.
So that you mentioned the Sunday school class. So these are the things that we've learned. This video series that Beverly showed us, another online series that we attended with the First Baptist Church in Wiley, the Little Rock, Arkansas Conference. Excellent information, and we're still learning. But that's the types of things, the types of tidbits that we'll try to be pointing out.
We also want to go at the pace of the class. If we have needs in the class, then let's talk about them. Let's see if we can help each other and grow together, because we're still on this journey, and anybody who is on the journey or think they may be on the journey, or they're watching someone that they're close to who's on this journey, or has been on it for years and has some wisdom for us, please come and join us.
So when does tell us when the class starts? Do we know that yet?
January 20.
January 20th. So it's Sunday, January 20th. Where are y'all going to be meeting, do we know?
Across the field.
Across the field. Yeah. Not in the field, but across the field.
Not in the field, but in the business now.
Okay. Well, guys, we sincerely thank you so much for being a part of this today and sharing what God has put on your heart. It's one thing to kind of hear a calling. It's another thing to take that and run with it and really allow your experiences to help and serve others. So we really appreciate that.